Well, hey there, it's Dr. Scott. I'm speaking softly because I'm actually in the Harry Potter section of the bookstore that I grew up next to. My high school is right across the street. This is the Tattered Cover Bookstore. It's one of the largest bookstores in the United States, so it got really big. It wasn't a bookstore when I was a kid, but it was definitely here when I was in high school. So it's a great place, I thought, to introduce the queer theory module of the course, right? In part because this now, since I moved long ago, turns out to be the gay neighborhood of Denver. It's called Capitol Hill. And so it's kind of like San Francisco's version of the Castro, or Denver's version of the Castro. And it brings up the two main questions that one would ask when applying queer theory and an LGBTQ lens to children's literature. And it's quite similar to what we've done with feminist literature and post-colonial literature. So the question is, first of all, how are queer people represented in children's literature? And second, what does it mean when they're not represented, which often turns out to be just as important as the representations. So those are the two main lenses that we'll be using this week, and of course that applies to Mr. Potter back here, since Rowling announced after finishing the series that Professor Dumbledore was gay, like Dr. Scott is, in advance instead of after my series is over, and that's kind of cool. Other things that I think might be helpful in terms of introducing this topic. First of all, you're welcome to kind of go backwards at this point. We're getting to the end of the course, right? So, have we already encountered some queer characters? I mean, I don't know. What about the White Rabbit and Alice? What about the Red Queen? What about Alice? I don't know. What about Long John Silver? I think some of you speculated a bit about that. Nobody mentioned Captain Hook, but the long curls and etc. The other characters that we could perhaps mention, Peter Pan himself, or Wendy, or, well, not Wendy, no, not. But how about Tinkerbell? So we've got any number of possibilities to sort through. And again, you're quite welcome to kind of backwards journey, especially because this week there's no assigned readings in the children's lit. I'll be asking you to look at a little known but very queer friendly 1941 Disney short animation. And I know some of you are convinced that I just hate Disney, and I don't. I love the suffragette part that he put into Mary Poppins. I tried to emphasize that last week. And I also am stunned and amazed to discover this Reluctant Dragon thing that was made in 1941, and really, from my perspective as a queer person myself, is about as queer friendly as it gets. So take a look at that, see if you agree. But that means we won't be reading anything. Now, that is based on a short story, conveniently enough, by our Wind in the Willows author, Graham. So the short story was written in 1898, the Disney film is in 1941, and here we are in 2017 trying to figure out what the heck is going on. The other selection is, of course, Mr. Potter back here. However, again, my experience teaching the courses, you know way more about Harry Potter than I ever will. And even if you haven't, I'm not really thinking that I want to find the pages in the 8 volumes and counting that Rowling has produced to point you to. So I'm letting you guide yourself through either the films or the books or both. And I'm looking forward to you super Potterheads telling me what I don't know, which would be great. So you get to be the professors here at the end of the course. I'll end by mentioning 2 terms that might be very handy in queer theory. And one is this term heteronormativity. Heteronormativity, which is the default assumption that everything in the world is automatically straight and revolves around male and female couples with 2.5 children living in the suburbs who are white, etc., etc. So sort of the default assumption that everyone and everything is automatically straight, and it is a pervasive lens, and queer critics tend to push back against it. So you might keep that in mind as you're reading through these texts and think about the concept of heteronormativity. Then looking forward to the very last reading this week. There are some readings, but they're all lit theory readings. There's a concept called intersectionality. Intersectionality that's borrowed from feminist criticism, and it has to do with the overlapping identities that we all have. So I'm white, I'm male, I'm straight, I'm not. What am I saying? I'm white, I'm male, I'm gay, I'm middle-aged, I'm from Denver, I have a PhD, I have I wear a beard, I don't know. All of my overlapping identities contribute to who I am. So what's so useful about the intersectionality concept is that it acknowledges all these overlapping identities in all of us. So as you're moving forward to the very last test, take a look at that concept of intersectionality. I leave you with Audre Lorde's wonderful essay on being a lesbian parent, a black lesbian parent in the 1980s. Her very famous essay, "There is no hierarchy of oppressions."